See, my story, I've been doing this for 30 years now, and we've been very successful at it. In fact, we were very successful at it even when we were doing it wrong, simply because we would focus on the minority of the population that could actually respond to the old way of thinking, which was a carb dominant program, high in cardio. So there are a certain percentage of population, albeit maybe around 15% or less. We just had a talk by Tim Noakes earlier today, and in a Twitter conversation that I was lucky enough to have with Professor Tim Noakes, he estimates that the world population is genetically about 15% of the world population is genetically, naturally insulin sensitive. The rest of us have some kind of insulin insensitivity or insulin resistance. And if we don't, and we consistently eat high carbohydrate, like I've seen throughout my years doing this, eventually what worked before doesn't work anymore. So the majority of my 30 years, I taught carb loading and glycogen replenishment, and pre and post workout meals. Eat 6 small meals a day. Do get your cardio in every day, and then through Dr. Lenskes, Dr. Brian Lenskes, and Doug Reynolds, one of the co-founders of this conference. I was exposed to the low carb, high fat lifestyle. And I was finally convinced to attend one of these conferences over 3 years ago, and now I get to speak at one. I am so excited that I'm part of this breakout group on this lunchtime meeting. I'm so happy that you decided to spend your lunchtime meeting time with me. So I realized that I was doing it wrong, and this is a little over 3 years ago, or a little less than 3 years ago. And I had to take my organization, the one that I direct, and tell people that, hey, we're doing a 180. We were doing things wrong. And there's actually a benefit to doing low carb and high fat for performance. That it's not just therapeutic. It's not just for medical means. That there's actually a wellness and a fitness and a human performance benefit. Now, like other fitness professionals, like other coaches, I had reservations. I was skeptical about this. If you ask Dr. Brian Lenskes the story, when he first introduced it to me, it was on a Friday night over the phone, and when he first called me, I literally thought he was trying to sell me some network marketing product. I thought he wanted to sign me up for Amway or something like that. And he obviously, that was the farthest thing from what he was trying to do. He was trying to convince me that I would be a better practitioner, and I would be able to help people not only fight off disease and jump on a progressive metabolic bandwagon, so to speak, to help people fight off prediabetes and this thing called insulin resistance, but I would also be able to help people, continue to help people to jump higher and run faster and be stronger and build more muscle and burn more body fat. And that was my wheelhouse. And I threw up red flags, threw up what I thought were going to be the things that disqualified what he was telling me about, and that would be that a high-fat diet would raise cholesterol and thus increase risk of heart disease. And as we've learned through other professionals in this conference and other research, that's just simply not true. I also thought, wouldn't a low-carbohydrate diet impede glycogen replenishment and thus lower lean mass? Now, muscle uses glycogen anaerobically, and high-intensity athletes will deplete that glycogen. And when that goes away, and you don't eat glucose to be converted into muscle glycogen, or your liver glycogen stores are really low, isn't that going to impede performance? And he said no. And I was still very skeptical about that. So where do you get that muscle glycogen replenishment? And so to be continued, right? I had to find out how and where and why he claimed that performance would improve on a low carb, high fat diet. So wouldn't a low carb, high fat diet cause water loss, and thus, because the protein is a diuretic, and that a fat-based diet that is oil-based and not water-based, isn't that going to increase the risk of dehydration and thus heat illness in a warmer climate? And he said no. And I didn't believe him at first. Wouldn't bodybuilders and those athletes interested in muscle hypertrophy be at a disadvantage without carb loading, right? The carbs do give you this puffiness and this bigness, that bodybuilders are interested in. They're interested in being as big as they possibly can be. They want useless hypertrophy. They also want to be as lean as they can be, and they also want to be as dry as they can be on stage. So there are advantages even in bodybuilding, which is traditionally a muscle building, carb loading aesthetic sport. There is advantages to a low carb, high fat diet. So I delved into the research to find out the answer, right? Because I needed to be proven wrong. These are why I was hesitant before. I had known about fat loading, but typically for ultra marathon runners and for people who competed in trekking, these long, ultra long distances where they would compete for over 12 hours, 24 hours. Some of these races are 36 hours straight, just crazy races. And I've heard about, carry some nuts and seeds to get you through. But it's so much more than that. It's not just low carb, high fat performance is not just mitigated to aerobic athletes. And I was skeptical for anaerobic athletes and strength athletes who primarily relied on creatine phosphate and anaerobic glycolysis for their sport, especially in events where there were tournaments. So if it was a high intensity sport where you were going to deplete glycogen over and over again because you were going to go up in multiple anaerobic bouts, then how are you going to replenish muscle glycogen without consumption of it? So, so things like tournaments, I thought would be a great example of when not to use a ketogenic approach. Very, very interesting. So, what did the research say? Right now, obviously, you're attending this conference, and you know that there's a happy ending to this story. But let's try and still be objective. Let's try not to hold bias. Let's keep an open mind. So. Established collaborative research shows, and this conference proves that, shows that a ketogenic diet is therapeutic for various diseases and thus reduces mortality and improves longevity. So there are some people that just fare a whole lot better with carb restriction and fat dominance, right? And we can talk about type 2 diabetic, number one, right? We can talk about people fighting cancer. We can talk about epileptics. We can talk about Alzheimer's or type 3 diabetes. We can even talk about, in this conference, type 1 diabetes. The ketogenic diet is the way to go for that. But less known research shows that ketone-producing diets also improve body composition. So they're going to help with aesthetics. They're going to help with leanness and muscle building and performance. Topic of this session, topic of this lesson, in both aerobic and anaerobic athletes who are able to take the time to become fat adapted. Look, that's underlined. And therein lies a correlation in ketogenic diets for performance research, who are able to take the time to become fat adaptive. And here are two examples of some research where they showed an increase in lean body mass, which is good for anaerobic sports, a decrease in body fat, and an increase in performance, in weightlifting, in Olympic weightlifting athletes who are centered on producing a great amount of anaerobic power. ketogenically. Fascinating, huh? So when I looked at the research, I found a contradiction. So I found several studies that said that a low-carb, high-fat diet or program was great for performance, and that athletes actually had an ergogenic advantage if they did it. And then I found almost an equal amount of research that debunked it, that said that performance suffered, body fat suffered, and that even other biomarkers, blood pressure or blood lipids, were negatively affected by the ketogenic diet. What's going on here? We've got a contradiction, as the slide says. We've got a contradiction. So why? Why incredible research would there be a contradiction? The common correlation associated with the study outcomes was time. Look, that's in bold, so that's an important point. The common correlation associated with the study outcomes was time. And I found that in my own research. This is just my own personal research, in looking at as many studies as I could to back up this big switch. Now remember, think about where I'm coming from. I am the director of the National Association of Sports Nutrition, and I've licensed many personal trainers and sports nutritionists, and now metabolic practitioners. And now I was going to basically rip up the curriculum of these courses and tell the people that I've already certified and that we need to change things. So I really had to be confident before I got on a video and said to my membership that we were wrong. I had to be confident that the research showed clearly that there was a benefit of a low-carb, high-fat diet in performance over a high-carb, low-fat diet. Well, here's what I found. The shorter the study, the poorer the results. Studies range from a few days to months, with the longest study several years. And we're talking performance studies, right? There's studies on longevity and studies on disease fighting that go longer than that, right? Some famous studies that go up over 10 years. But I'm talking about just in my wheelhouse, just in performance. Okay, let's look at a sample of what I found. All right. Now, my plus is that I've been in the industry mentoring sports nutritionists and personal trainers now for, like I said, close to 30 years. Right? I have a bachelor's degree and some postgraduate work, but I never finished my master's degree because I just been having too much fun doing this stuff. And I'd love to go to school more, but I just never got around to it, and that's neither here nor there. So I need to look to people who have achieved a higher education, people who have actually done these studies, like those with their master's degrees and PhDs and postgraduate work, that have done this research. And so I went to the journals and tried to find the most credible research I could. And here's some of it. This is just a sample, and so I don't want to go over and over and over and over with all the research, but here's just a sample, right? And this is a low-carbohydrate ketogenic diet impairs anaerobic exercise performance in exercise-trained women and men. A randomized sequence crossover trial, and this is from the European Journal of Sports Medicine, I think, Europe. PMC.org, and this is actually a link, so you can find these and read them yourself if you download a copy of the slide deck. So this was only for 4 days. So they put people on a ketogenic diet for 4 days, and their performance went downhill. Interesting. We'll talk about that further. Next study. Low carbohydrate, high fat diet impairs exercise economy and negates the performance benefit from intensified training in elite race walkers. Race walkers, right? So So race walking is intensely anaerobic. I don't know about that. These are recent studies, 2017, pretty recent. Only did a low carbohydrate diet for 3 weeks. Very interesting. Effects of eating ad libitum. Eating as much as you want, at liberty, when you're hungry, eat. When you feel like you're hungry, when you think you should eat a low carbohydrate diet. High fat, right? Now, this is very interesting. This is in middle-aged male runners who have been told and conditioned to eat multiple times a day, pack in those calories, eat, snack, graze all day. And so now we're going to graze all day and eat a high-fat diet. And they were on it for 3 weeks, and they couldn't walk any faster. Imagine that. Very interesting. So anaerobic performance, last study on this page, anaerobic performance after a low carbohydrate diet, followed by 7 days carbohydrate loading in male basketball players. So we did all this carb restriction and for 3 weeks, and then we totally undid any benefit, or we reversed the metabolic shift to fat, if there was one, by carb loading, and of course we got poor results. And that was in 2019. Very, very interesting stuff. Still good stuff to read. A good read, all of these. All right, next. Now we're going to get into a little bit longer studies. Ketogenic diet does not affect strength performance in elite artistic gymnasts. All right, so this is this is a neutral. It's like it didn't hurt us. We did it and it didn't hurt them. And this is a little older study. This is 4 weeks and neutral to favorable results, meaning you can do it and it won't hurt you, kind of thing. Next study, ketogenic diet benefits body composition and well-being, but not performance, in a pilot case study of New Zealand endurance athletes. So it improves the way you look, it improves the way you feel, but you don't run any faster. 5 weeks, neutral to favorable, right? Ketogenic adaptation enhances exercise performance. Enhances. Oh, that's a favorable word. Exercise performance and body composition responses to training in endurance athletes. 2018, 12 weeks, favorable study. So now we're getting longer on low carb, high fat, and performance is becoming more favorable. Very interesting. There's that correlation. So here I am sharing what I found. A low carbohydrate ketogenic diet reduces body mass without compromising performance in powerlifting and Olympic weightlifting athletes. Cool study, 2018. It reduces their weight, but they can lift more. And this is a weight-driven sport. Powerlifting athletes on the Olympic level. Now we're talking a high-end athlete whose every pound that they lift is the difference between a gold medal, a silver medal, on down the line. Silver medal down the line. Don't make fun of me, Jeff. I know you're listening. I know you're watching. I just get excited. Good study. 12 weeks, favorable results. And that's in an anaerobic population, that study. Last study on this page, weight loss improved physical performance, improved cognitive function. All right, what's the use to an athlete if they can run faster and jump higher if they don't jump when they're supposed to, or they run the wrong way? Let's improve their cognitive function as well and improve their eating behavior. In other words, they were more compliant to a plan, and it improved their metabolic profile. So in other words, they're healthier. They're going to live longer. It's not only improving their performance, it's actually improving their health and well-being. Very interesting. 12 weeks, favorable results. 12 weeks, favorable results. Good stuff. Okay. Let's go over even longer than 12 weeks, right? Research sample long-term, as it says. Low carb and ketogenic diets increase quality of life, physical performance, body composition, and metabolic health of women with breast cancer. So this is a study that didn't intend to show that it increased performance, physical performance. But after 20 weeks, they found that it actually made these people who were medically challenged become more athletic. That's great. That's great. And help fight off their disease. So, if you are a skeptical personal trainer or if you are a skeptical nutritionist, this information should turn your head. This information should make you think differently about balancing a menu or about how you phrase eating fat, how you phrase eating carbohydrate, and of course, maintaining protein. We'll talk a little bit about that more in subsequent slides. 3-year chronic consumption, 3 years, longest study that we'll talk about. Chronic consumption of low carbohydrate diet impairs exercise. Impairs. Oh no, we just blew it. My whole correlation is out the door. Why, why would I even put this in here if I'm trying to tell you that as time increased, so did performance? Well, it has a small unfavorable effect on lipid profile. Small. So this is saying that it impairs exercise performance. It might hurt, excuse me, your lipid profile a little bit. But the study shows that they got poor results, and this is why. There was some bias going into the study saying that this is going to be difficult to follow and difficult to adhere to. And so the way the program was set up, they weren't really adhering to a consistent low-carb, high-fat diet. They were kind of going back and forth, or there were a lot of inconsistencies where they'd fall off, come back on, fall off. And it was self-reported that they just couldn't stick to it. So what do you think? Well, if they don't follow the protocol and they don't follow it to its utmost, are you really measuring the value of what they're doing? Or are you just kind of saying, yeah, theoretically this might work, but it's too hard to do, so over 3 years, if you don't stick to it, you're not going to get good results. Well, if you don't stick to anything, you're not going to get good results. If you follow the standard American diet right now, if you just do what marketing and television tell you to do, are you going to have a favorable result? Well, obviously not. Look at the state that America is in. Right. I digress. Let's go to the next slide. So let's give you what you came for. Let's talk about low carb, high fat performance. What do you have to do to be successful eating low carb, high fat, and wanting to perform better? What does the program look like? Well, number one, it must be ketogenic, and that's different for everyone. Right? That means carbs need to be restricted to cause the body to use fat anaerobically. Right? Typically in a high carbohydrate diet, fat burning or lipolysis occurs aerobically. Fat burns in a carbohydrate flame. Right? So you need to be in an aerobic steady state. You need to have plenty of muscle glycogen to burn fat if you're in a carb-dominant diet. I believe, research has shown, the NASN's new position and policy is that we should get the body to produce ketones. And the way to do that is to restrict carbohydrate as fuel and present fat as a plentiful, ready resource for energy. Now, as individuals go, especially those who already have an athletic base or have a above average lean body mass, have an above average metabolism, the average range of daily carb consumption for a ketogenic response is between 20 and 50 grams. Right? So some athletes who already have some existing hypertrophy can actually healthfully produce ketones in a safe range without restricting carbs as much as a sedentary person might. Right? If you already have biomarkers for prediabetes or you have some underlying condition, then yeah, let's bring those carbs all the way down to 20. But if you can produce either as demonstrated through your sticks or a finger prick, if you can produce uh, um, greater than trace amounts of ketones in your blood at 50 grams of carbohydrate, then so be it. Then you are still accomplishing what needs to be accomplished. Um, and there are some outliers. So I've met some people that are fully ketogenic at even closer to 70, 80 carbohydrates a day. Crazy. And then I've met some that have to eat almost no carbohydrate to invoke a ketogenic response. They're already scavenging glycogen or they're deaminizing protein to create that glucose so that and prevent more than trace ketosis. So in those cases, we have to do some extreme things. But generally speaking, 20 to 50 grams of carbohydrate. Other studies will confirm that. Now, as a sports nutritionist, we also want to give credence to nutrient timing. Nutrient timing is something coined by a lot of high carbohydrate sports nutritionists, but it is still valid. It is still valid in low carb, high fat performance. In other words, you want to optimize nutrient absorption. You still need your essential nutrients. You still need amino acids. You still need electrolytes. You still need water soluble and fat soluble vitamins that are essential. And when you consume them may influence the readiness for your body to absorb them and utilize them for growth and repair, utilize them for energy production, utilize them to optimize hormone response, right? We need lots of things going on at the same time for your body to be anabolic, for your body to grow and repair and increase in muscle mass. And we need a lot of things to be going on at the same time for your body to choose to burn fat for fuel and choose to burn your own body fat, especially if it's in excess, to choose that for a fuel. So a lot of these things we have to do together to cause that. Okay, so this is one of my favorite slides in this presentation. This kind of correlates the pitfalls in the research relative to the phases of a successful low carb high fat performance program. So there are 3 phases. And the first phase is ketogenesis. We got to get your body to produce ketones. And a lot of people feel bad when they do that because they might not be eating completely nutritionally balanced. They might be going into the program a little dehydrated. Dehydration can be cumulative. So if you haven't consistently consumed H2O for days or weeks or even hours up to cutting your carbohydrate significantly, then you can get this keto flu. And for those of you who are into this science, you're familiar with it. And it can be prevented and corrected through proper hydration and electrolyte consumption. Basically, the same thing you would do to prevent a hangover, you can do to prevent keto flu during ketogenesis. And that's when it can become most intense. Let me go back. I got excited. I hit the button. I still want to be on this slide. I still want to be. Phase 2. Phase 2 happens 3 to 9 weeks in, and it's when your body finally relents, so to speak, to the fact that carbohydrate is not coming anytime soon. And so I'm not only producing ketones, but I'm going to significantly use fat for fuel. And it's not going to be like the engine starts and the engine stops. I'm going to consistently use lipids to produce ATP in my cells. This is when fat burning starts to pick up. A lot of people think that within the first few weeks, first 2 weeks of a ketogenic diet, that's when the best results happen, and that's not the case. Usually in the beginning, you're going to have water loss, you're going to have a decrease in inflammation, so you're going to have scale weight loss, but more fat burning occurs somewhere within the fat adaptation phase. And this is when you really start to enhance your metabolism and go from being a poor fat burner to a good fat burner. Now, the downside or the difficulty with this phase is that if it has to be consistent, you have to maintain ketosis. You can't give your cells a glimmer of hope that there's going to be a high resupply of sugar or glucose in the near future, and therefore they're going to hold out for that and metabolically uh, uh, um, uh, make do, so to speak, rather than fully give into the benefits of ketogenic metabolism. Another thing that happens during fat adaptation is the body recognizes that we need glycogen, especially as athletes, especially as anaerobic athletes. So it starts to scavenge for glycogen, and it doesn't give up or waste glycogen as much. So we recycle things like pyruvate and lactic acid and create ATP stores through the phosphocreatine system with much lower levels of glycogen consumption. So within the 3 to 9 weeks, athletes tend to actually improve glycogen stores, even though they're consuming way lower carbohydrate. And this is very, very interesting. Now, let's make a note. If you're in the middle of an athletic season where every competition counts, where every event counts, it's probably not the time to go through fat adaptation, because you might be someone who has a momentary, like these studies show, a momentary decrease in performance, momentary decrease in energy. You might get keto flu, and you have to work through those things. On the other side, performance is going to increase, but in the short term, there could be detriment to that, especially if you're not ironclad consistent, especially if you're going in and out of ketosis and your body's kind of riding the fence. That's when performance can decrease. But if you can make it 8 to 9 weeks with very little carbohydrate consumption, very little variance from the program, then you have, I think, stretched your metabolic muscle to the point where now you're building a foundation and becoming fat adaptive. And then if you continue on, even if you falter a little bit, even if there's a cheat meal, there's that birthday cake on your birthday within 6 months or something like that, or even you falter a little more than that. If you get back on the horse, so to speak, and you make it past fat adaptation, and for the majority of the time you are successful at producing ketones and using fat for fuel, then you can become metabolically flexible. So over time, let's say you've done this for a year, it's just like fitness, it's just like working out. If you introduce carbohydrates, or you get to the point where you eat an amount of carbohydrate that throws you out of ketosis, then to get back into ketosis happens sooner than if you haven't successfully gone through phase 1 and phase 2. Very, very interesting stuff. I'm not saying that everyone should just go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. That's not good. That's just kind of like a metabolic yo-yo dieting, right? But you can do things like leptin resets, and you can do momentary glycogen replenishment intermittently if you're metabolically flexible without detriment, if you get to this point. Very, very interesting. Not everybody gets to this point, but most of my clients have. And research shows that you can become metabolically flexible now. But here's the rule. Here's the rule of metabolic flexibility. You must eat according to what I call the seesaw rule, right? The seesaw, one side goes up, the other side goes down. Let's see if I can do this here. One side goes up, the other side goes down. One side goes up, the other side goes down. Okay, so if you eat fat, any kind of fat, hopefully it's healthy fat, your carbohydrate has to be restricted. And then if you choose, or you're in a situation where you're going to eat carbohydrate, you need to eat very little to no fat. Because when they're together in your bloodstream at the same time, we wrote a little continuing education course about this. When insulin and glucose and saturated fat and LDL are all in the bloodstream at the same time, that's when health goes down. That's when potentially even performance will go down, but most likely metabolic health is trashed because you're increasing your risk for heart disease when you have high insulin and high glucose in your high fat in your veins and arteries at the same time. Interesting stuff. 3 phases, very interesting stuff. We can talk a little bit more about this in the question and answer period, but let's talk a little bit more about some other stuff, all right? A lot of keto people say, just eat intuitively. We don't have to consider calorie intake because when you eat high fat, you're satiated and you're full and you're just not going to overeat. Now, hormone balance is of primary importance. So if your eating habits are all messed up, athlete or not, if your eating habits are all messed up and we're radically removing a whole macronutrient from your diet, then to really be restrictive on portion control in the beginning of that is probably counterproductive. So first, let's concentrate on hormonal balance. Let's get you into ketosis. So if you're in phase 1, then I'm not going to worry so much about calories. I'm going to want you to eat till you're satiated, and I'm going to just be concerned with getting you into ketosis. So that means that we have to grossly restrict carbohydrate, and we have to make fat the dominant macronutrient in your diet. And if we're going to invoke ketosis as quick as possible, then that doesn't mean we mess around. We just drop your carbs down to 20 grams. That's a guideline for our sports nutritionists. And in some cases we have to go lower than that, but 20 grams is a good start. And we also need to make sure that our clients are eating enough protein and they're eating essential amino acids. So does that mean that you can be a vegan and get into ketosis? Yes, you can, but to stay there and maintain or not have any nutrient deficiencies, that means you're going to have to be very, very, very creative. And a vegan ketogenic diet, I've written them. I've had vegan ketogenic clients, but long term, it's very difficult without supplementation to offset potential nutrient deficiencies. Okay, so once hormones normalize, so once we reduce fatty liver, and that can happen as soon as 5 days. Research has shown right in this conference that if you restrict carbohydrate, get into ketosis for as little as 5 days, you can improve liver function. You can therefore improve hormone balance and reduce insulin resistance. Now, so some blood tests will show that. But as sports nutritionists or as metabolic practitioners, our hormone improvement is indicated by we measure fat loss through a device that measures body fat without muscle loss. So we want to see that body fat is going down and lean body mass is staying the same or increasing. We want to make sure that nutritional ketosis is increasing, and that's best done through a finger prick, because as all of you know who have measured ketones, or some of you might not, the urine sticks become less and less effective, especially if you become very fat adapted, because you're using the ketones for fuel, so they don't make it to your bladder. They're metabolized before they're filtered out of the blood. So blood is better than a urine test. Fasting insulin lab, that's great. We're looking at the NASN to try to get our fasting insulin lab test less than 5. And so once all those things occur, once now we see some measured fat loss, now we can look at portion control, and we can look at distribution of calories, distribution of food, to continue to improve results. Right? So the common consensus is still true for low-carb, high-fat diets. Daily calorie consumption should start to be around resting metabolic rate. That's your baseline energy production. And then we're going to look to draw from body fat for anything over basal metabolic rate, over baseline. Right? So moving around, exercise, we're going to derive that hopefully from our body fat stores and our glycogen stores. So what about meal frequency, right? We've got people doing intermittent fasting. We've got people eating one meal a day. We've got people doing 36-hour fasting, especially to help prevent type 2 diabetes, or even as a therapeutic means to improve type 2 diabetes. So intermittent fasting is great. But I would say, even though you do intermittent fasting to cause a calorie deficit within the fasting window, if we're trying to increase or maintain lean body mass in a high intensity athlete, the ideal meal frequency is between 2 and 4 meals a day. 2 and 4 meals a day. So athletes eating more frequently than those less active to improve a greater micronutrient absorption. So let's talk about the timing or the position of those meals. So if fat loss is your primary objective, then exercise during a fast is going to potentiate that. If you're happy with your body fat percentage and you're concentrating on gaining weight, gaining muscle, then there might be a meal between 1 and 4 hours before your workout and directly after to help replenish. Those are times where you're going to offset depletion, and then post-workout you're in a healthy hormonal state that's going to accelerate absorption because you're in a perceived deficiency on multiple levels. And so timing of meals, especially for those trying to recover from a workout or trying to improve lean body mass, is still important for high-fat, low-carb athletes, and that would be the most important meal being immediately after, and then maybe 2 to 4 hours after that for that second meal, right? Other 2 meals equally placed or strategically placed either before, 1 to 4 hours before, or away from your workout if you're trying to work out during a fast to potentiate fat loss. Hopefully that solves that or answers those questions, right? So we've got basically people that are interested in just performance, interested in just fat loss, interested in just lean body mass, or lean body mass increase, or a combination. And so that would be just positioning the 2 to 4 meals based on your client or your athlete's needs. Regardless of the meal frequency, meal size can be very simple. Now, as a sports nutritionist, I actually write menus that say eat this many ounces of this food and add this. Here's your side dish. Here's your. So we assemble custom meals, and I think the future of nutrition, specifically sports nutrition, is just that, individualized nutrition. But as a rule of thumb, pun intended, right? Your meal size to absorb that meal, hopefully satiate you, not make you so full that you can't exercise. These volumetrics, these hand portions are a good guide, right? So if your macronutrients are 5% or less of carbohydrate, 20% of protein, and 75% fat, and that could vary 5%. Some of my athletes need 25% protein, but let's go with 20% protein for this presentation. So we're talking your palm for protein, your fist for natural fats. So a fistful of olives. If it's just the olive oil, then maybe it's going to be a little bit smaller than that, like the shot glass, an ounce, or a fistful of avocado, naturally occurring fats and only a thumb's worth of some natural non-starch carbohydrate, like a strawberry or 5 blueberries, because there's some nutrient density of those foods. So one strawberry only has 1 carbohydrate. 5 blueberries have only 1 carbohydrate, but they have several antioxidants and phytonutrients that could benefit or prevent nutrient deficiency. All right. Net carbs. All right. Now this is controversial amongst the low-carb community. There are a lot of medical professionals and people that have much greater degrees than I do that say don't worry about net carbs, just count total carbohydrate. But when it comes to performance and when it comes to athletic goals like lowering body fat or enhancing lean body mass, I think we need to give some credence to net carbs. Obviously, a peach has a greater impact than an avocado in carbohydrate. Here's the difference. A lot of net carb products are using synthetic fiber or manufactured fiber that is not naturally occurring to lower their net carbs score. So a bar or a cookie or a shake or some kind of processed product that has a net carb score that seems to be ketogenic, 4 net carbs or 3 net carbs, 5 net carbs. If they're using inulin or they're using some other fiber that's not naturally occurring and it's modified, then I don't give that credence. But when we're comparing a peach to an avocado, yeah, net carbs matter. Sweeteners. So this kind of goes along with what we're talking about, right? Sweeteners are going to add flavor. They're enticing because sweet things come from carbohydrates, and in their absence, we might crave them, right? So there are sugar-free sweeteners out there that are not made of carbohydrate, but then they give you that flavor. They're very intense. They're multiple times sweeter than naturally occurring simple sugars in nature, and they still can invoke an insulin response. They still can interrupt ketosis, so they can foil your goal to become ketogenic or become fat adaptive. So I would stay away from most artificial sweeteners. Use them in moderation. Specifically, aspartame, stay away from. Sucralose. Some people can safely use stevia or monk fruit. Some people can safely use erythritol, but it's very individual. And so I found with my clients that to say that monk fruit is safe or to say that erythritol is safe is too general. We have to individually test each client, measure their glucose, measure their ketones, have them take the sweetener or the product with nothing else, wait 20 minutes, test it again, and see if there's a change. So beware of sweeteners, even if you're an athlete. Okay, here's something interesting, especially with younger athletes. So people who say they're ketogenic but don't try to eat balanced and don't try to minimize nutrient deficiency. So they eat foods that just contain fat and very little carbohydrate, but they're not nutrient dense. They don't have these nutrients in them, can become deficient. And this is evident in some study, especially when it's done with kids. You tell an epileptic kid that he's going to have a seizure if he eats carbohydrate, he's going to avoid that. But it doesn't mean that he's necessarily going to eat healthy otherwise. He's going to stick to that parameter to avoid a seizure and not necessarily, eat his leafy greens. So what we found is that a dirty ketogenic diet that still produces ketosis in the long term can cause nutrient deficiencies in these vitamins and minerals. And so what I did was I said, okay, this study says that a long-term ketogenic diet can provide these deficiencies. Well, what foods naturally have a good source of these? And I found various foods that are high in these different ones, and then the highlighted ones, or the ones that are in bold, have nutrients in multiple categories. So liver's not my favorite, but it is in just about, it's in 4 out of 6 of these columns. So it is a nutritious food for long-term prevention of nutrient deficiency on a ketogenic or even a carnivorous diet. Right? Eggs, cream, fish like salmon and mackerel and tuna. These things can help prevent nutrient deficiencies. And then if you're ketogenic but not carnivorous, completely carnivorous, you can have orange and yellow vegetables. You can have a few raspberries and avocado, broccoli and cabbage, green beans, in moderation, to help prevent long-term nutrient deficiency and thus possible decreasing in performance. All right, that's all I have for my presentation. I'm sure you have questions. Hopefully Noah is around. He hasn't gone off. Noah, my son, is going to help me moderate and ask questions, and I will spend the rest of the time today, and the time we have left, discussing and answering questions about low carb, high fat performance, preferably, or if you have questions about the NASN or becoming a personal trainer or becoming a sports nutritionist or a metabolic health practitioner, we can answer those questions. So ask away.
We got one question. Here's the first one from Kurt Klen. Is the NASN working on conducting any form of study as it pertains to a long-term ketogenic diet?
Good question. The NASN is a organization that benefits from other people's research. We are not a university, but there is so much research going on out there that what we're trying to do is constantly keep our courses contemporary to practically apply research done in other forms and other venues. So we're not equipped right now to do our own research. That could be something we do in the future. But right now, our specific mission is to provide courses so that practitioners can practically apply the cumulative research that is presented and done in forums like this. I mean, this is a great place to get research, right? The Low Carb USA conference. A lot of people are doing different research things, and so we'll pick from that, try to put it into a practical application. Got another question for me, Noah?
All right. Have marathon experience with carb-based nutrition. Many halves in fat adapted. A variety of reasons I went away from keto and am now low carb but not keto. Currently training for a 50K October as low carb. Below 100 for sure, but not tracking macros, but not specifically keto. Thoughts? Do I need to go keto specifically? Additional info: I'm a slow runner. Estimate 50K, 7 hours plus.
7 hours plus is typically steady state aerobic activity. So an experienced marathon runner or someone who has been doing it a while is going to be good at aerobic lipolysis, to burning fat using carbs and oxygen. And that's best done in a steady state. The benefit of going on a lower carbohydrate diet and the benefit of actually getting into ketosis, Terry, and getting into the point where you can successfully burn fat anaerobically is at the end of the race, or if the race is not flat. So during a hill, or during an interval, or during trying to pass somebody, or trying to push towards the end, or trying to improve your pace over time, fat adaptation through first ketosis, and then a lower level of carbohydrate. Now, it looks like you're already doing that.
it looks like that you are significantly at lower than 100 carbs. You're probably in trace ketosis. You are metabolically flexing your metabolic muscle right now by invoking ketosis within a certain percentage of your muscle fiber. The question is, if you want to improve that, especially on long races like this, a 50K or along these trekking races, that you just run out of energy and your body ultimately glycogen depletes and you have to function on fat. So if you can do that more efficiently through ketosis and continue to burn fat anaerobically when you're at the end of your race, that you might perform better. Hopefully that answers your question, Terry.
He also added very hilly course.
Very hilly course. So if it's a hilly course, man, then I would definitely get fat adapted, so that your body doesn't glycogen deplete so readily. If you can scavenge muscle glycogen and hold on to it longer in the race, then that hill at the very end is going to be fed by both ketones and glycogen because you have stuff left over. Whereas if you're purely high carb, low fat, you're going to ultimately bonk at some point. You're ultimately going to glycogen deplete. So there's a definite endurance advantage to fat adaptation in long and in athletic events lasting longer than 90 minutes, 2 hours, and you're saying like 7 hours.
From Paul, does ketosis prevent marathon runners from hitting the quote-unquote wall?
It doesn't prevent it, it delays it. So if you're running at a pace such that you're a combination of aerobic and anaerobic, which we all are, right? Nobody's purely an aerobic athlete or purely an anaerobic athlete. But if you're running at a high pace that's glycogen expensive, and you're fat adaptive, then muscle glycogen and liver glycogen are depleted at a slower rate than if you're just carb adaptive. So it prevents it, it delays it. What's up, Noah? What's the next one, man?
Thoughts on high protein, moderate fat for fat loss? Some in the community feel like high fat will prevent you from losing body fat.
Okay, so the downside to high protein is some people are genetically predisposed or just through repeated high protein consumption get good at deamination. And what's deamination? That's removing that nitrogen component from the amino acid and turning it into glucose. So high protein diets can burn anaerobic and have an insulin response if they're too high in protein. High fat should not prevent you from losing fat as long as you're not eating in surplus, right? The purpose of a ketogenic diet is to present fat as a dominant fuel source so that your body has no choice. If you've been eating high carbohydrate for decades, even as an athlete, your body's trained to do that. Your body's going to hold out for that carbohydrate because it knows it can glycogen replenish very quickly, right? But it also knows that if it doesn't expand the ketogenic pathway, then anaerobic glycolysis expends glycogen depletes much quicker. So I think carnivorous diets and higher protein diets are good, but once you start getting up to around 40 or 50% protein, it's too much for performance. There are some people that do those for other reasons, but strictly for performance, I found that around 20 to 30% is the sweet spot of protein. And that's as long as you're eating between your basal metabolic rate and your total energy expenditure, as long as you're eating a normal amount of volume of food or calories.
Which supplements do you recommend for keto/low carb followers?
Okay, supplements. That's a Pandora's box, right? So that there are people out there that say that we're trying to eat natural, we're trying to move away from processed foods, and supplements are basically, even though they might be isolated nutrients, they're still processed foods that we should avoid. So there's a school of thought within a certain percentage of my clients and ketogenic athletes that say, let's minimize, let's not do supplementation, let's not do things like whey protein powder or collagen. But for some clients who are trying to gain weight on a ketogenic diet, who are prone to insulin resistance, a little bit of collagen powder, a little bit of protein powder, especially if they don't like the taste of meat, or if we're transitioning them from a vegan diet to a 20 or 25, 30% protein diet, and then those supplements are good. So I do use collagen, I do use whey in moderation, and I also supplement in vitamin C. I think vitamin C and collagen work together. I personally take at least 3,000 milligrams of vitamin C a day. It's contraindicated for 10 oranges rather than 3 little vitamin C tablets that I get from Costco. So I recommend things like vitamin C. I do recommend caffeine. Caffeine is a great fat burner. It's a great lipolytic agent, so that your body is more enticed to use fat. So if we're trying to get somebody into ketosis and they can do a green tea every day or a nice healthy coffee, then that's beneficial. I don't think that you should have 3 Red Bulls and a Bang and a Monster a day. I think that's over the top. But healthy natural forms of caffeine are a good supplementation. Another controversial one amongst people low carb, high fat is exogenous ketones, because there are companies out there that say you can get into ketosis by just taking the supplement. And the whole purpose of getting into ketosis is not so that you just have ketones in your body. Indigenous ketones are evidence of your body utilizing a metabolic pathway to burn fat, I use that term, to metabolize fat for fuel. So to take ketones and then prick your finger and say I'm in ketosis is very misleading. But if you have a client who is an anaerobic client who's feeling a little sluggish in the fat adaptation phase, or they're having trouble, they're just in trace ketosis, then I think that exogenous ketones in a small amount can actually be like lighter fluid to the fire. So we can introduce, just like we're introducing fat to be metabolized in fat adaptation, we can, in the beginning phases of a low carb, high fat diet, we can add in ketones and say, look, this is an organic metabolite that you can also use for fuel as well. And I think that in my experience, that's made a hard leg workout for somebody who just says, this is making me too tired, I need my pre-workout full of sugar. Well, let's take some ketones and with a little caffeine in it, maybe that'll give you a jump so you feel like you're not in keto flu, or if you feel like your performance is not going to go down as a result of the absence of carbohydrate in the beginning of the program. And then we can taper off that as the body naturally starts to produce ketones. So I've seen people with exogenous ketones go from an average of a finger prick of about 0.6 ketones all the way up to, in its absence, it's gone up to 2 and 3.0 without the ketones. Very interesting. That's my personal experience. I don't know if I have clinical research to show that. More, Noah?
I do work out while IF.
I work out while I intermittent fast.
What do you think about it? I eat breakfast after my workout and put some whey protein in my coffee. Which exercises are more effective for improving insulin sensitivity? Would like to know your opinion.
Very good. So I think you should work out on a fast. I think that's great. If you're interested in primarily fat loss and you're exercising to invoke utilization of your own body fat, then I think you should fast before and after your workout. So there's a heightened metabolic response after your workout, or in a state of recovery, where your body is actually, if it's still in autophagy, it'll rob Peter to pay Paul. What does that mean? It'll use other parts of your body to replenish your muscles because they're the most depleted. And that will, those tissues will be replenished when you eat, say, 2 or 3 hours after workout. So if your fat loss is your primary goal, then you should probably exercise somewhere in the middle of your intermittent fast. I love coffee. If you're intermittent fasting and you add cream to the coffee, it is going to provide a minimal insulin response, but I think it's going to nonetheless delay autophagy. I think if you really are interested in getting rid of the saggy skin, improving your hair, quelling the old cells out of your body, then your intermittent fast should be 0 to close to 0 calories, right? The exception to that is if you have you can't make it 16 hours and your digestion is bad, then maybe we'll do things like bone broth that have a little bit of collagen in them, so that you don't feel uncomfortable. Protein in your coffee, or whey protein in your coffee post-workout. So if you're at a good body fat and your goal is to gain lean body mass on a ketogenic diet while intermittent fasting, that is a window of opportunity for absorption. So a hormonal response, as we learned in the primary sports nutritionist course in the NASN, the hormonal response to exercise is growth hormone release. So if your muscles are depleted of amino acids and they're looking for them and they're being sent the message to grow, then post-workout, whey protein is ideal. And that's for the purpose of building muscle. Now, whey protein can also have an insulin response. So let's put some cream in that coffee with your whey to slow the absorption so as not to spike your insulin too much. Obviously, you need insulin to absorb the nutrients, but the goal is not to have an overwhelming insulin response. What was the last part of that question?
Which exercises are more effective?
Oh, the exercise. That's right. The exercise. So that just comes down to Dr. Ben. You got to listen to his talk, but the summary of it is you want to involve your whole muscle. You don't want to just get the surface muscle fibers. You want to get the deep muscle fibers. You want an exercise that's going to take you from the very slowest slow twitch muscle fiber to the very fastest muscle twitch fiber, or fast and slow twitch muscle fibers. You want all of them. And that's best done under tension. So rather than counting reps, you want to slowly move through a resistance training movement such that there is fasciculation, meaning when you're doing it, you kind of get this little shakiness going, right? And your breathing rate goes up and your heart rate goes up. So there's a cardiovascular benefit to this. And that cumulative response to that kind of exercise is most metabolically impacted. So time under tension or smart training is the best exercise, most efficient exercise you can do for metabolic health.
59-year-old female, been keto for 4 years. Want to manage increasing A1C. Currently doing short 10-minute HIIT daily, yoga, walking, and dance. How long and often should I be doing cardio?
Very good. Okay. So the 1980s, 90s, early 2000s, Surgeon General and even sports nutrition, exercise physiologists were saying that we need to do 30 minutes of cardio every day to offset heart disease. And research has shown, just time has shown, that is the inefficient way to improve cardiovascular health. If you want to be a better fat burner, then we have to teach your body to burn fat. And then we have to put your body in a state where it's consuming and using up a lot of energy and using a lot of nutrients, such that when you replenish, the body recognizes that fat, including body fat, is a fuel. So I would say that if you're going to do cardio specifically, to improve body composition, that the HIIT training that you're talking about is good enough. If you are like our marathon runner, that 50K-er then you need to, if you want to do better at a race, you better go out and race. You better go out and run. If you want to run better, you better run. But clients come to me who want to improve their running ability, but the purpose of that is they think they're going to be a better fat burner. That's a fallacy. That they're going down the wrong path. They're going to become a better runner, but not necessarily a leaner person. So high intensity interval training, just like the HIIT training, can be done on alternate days or same days. I'd say not more than 2 or 3 days a week, 4 days a week for a greatest metabolic and lean effect.
I currently have a CGM for a few days. Are there any foods or activities to test?
Yes, bunches. So if you have a sweet tooth and you have a continuous glucose monitor, then you can sit, take a little bit of monk fruit, take a little packet of it or a teaspoon of it, and just watch your CGM, your continuous glucose monitor, watch it change over 20 minutes and see if there's an impact, right? But you want to do that with no other interfering food. You know, do a little bit of erythritol after blood sugar is normalized, right? Find out what's safe and what's not. You have a continuous glucose monitor now. You need to eat a variety of food, and I would do controls. I would do 2 or 3 strawberries and see if that affects your do 15 blueberries and see what fructose has an impact on your glucose. I would do I would even experiment with starches. So I would do a tablespoon of rice. I would do and just watch the impact. And this is great data for you. This is an indirect way of determining whether you're insulin sensitive or insulin resistant.
Any general macro supplements you recommend for elite keto athletes, and at what doses?
Micro supplements. So I think everybody should be doing about 3 grams of vitamin C a day. I think everyone should be doing fish oil. To boost immunity, I think we all should be doing zinc in just as little dosages. You could do 15 milligrams of zinc a day, and that's a great preventative to boost immune system. Remember, exercise produces stress. It produces oxidative stress. Every time you walk on the sole of your foot, there happens to be capillaries full of blood that get squished. And those little blood cells are carcasses now floating around in your body, right? So every time you push and squeeze, you actually create carnage in your bloodstream. And if you're very active and very physical, you create more carnage. And that can cause oxidative stress. That can reduce your resistance. So you need things to help scavenge and get rid of those. Autophagy helps to get rid of that stuff, and things like zinc and the vitamin C. If you are older in years, I'm 52, so I'm going to start to take, not start, but I've been taking over the past in my 50s a little DHEA. That is a good building block for testosterone, and I want to keep my testosterone up. And if I'm eating a high-fat diet and I eat a little bit, I supplement with DHEA, now I'm giving my body more building blocks to stay in the game, so to speak. I want to stay in the game. What else, Noah? Yeah, I think that's good for micros. You can text or email me, and we can talk more about micros. Next one.
What do you recommend for the ultra distance for race fuel? During my 1/2s, I did bacon and added NASN to my water.
Added the oh yeah, NASN. Okay, so you recommend for the ultra distance or race fuel during 1/2? Bacon and added NASN to my water. So this is a relative to how your performance is. So some people actually just perform better if the race is 3 hours or less, they perform better on just hydration and no food, no extra calories. Bacon's got a little salt in it. It tastes good, and it's extra fat. I think that intra-competition, refeeding during competition needs to be primarily electrolytes, ketones, amino acids, and then if it's a trekking event where you are worried about glycogen depletion, if you're a high-end athlete, then a mild form of glycogen depletion is warranted in events that are like there's these trekking events where people are racing for 24 hours straight, right? And so for their performance, they're at such a deficit that mild carbohydrate consumption in the form of, and we're not talking fructose, because that's going to go to your liver. You want it to go more directly to your muscles. We're talking glucose supplementation is warranted in those situations, and that's for those that are fat adaptive or those that are metabolically flexible. What else?
I'm interested in becoming certified as a licensed sports nutritionist. I'm not a doctor or certified as a health professional. Do I need to get certified as a personal trainer first?
Correct. So the prerequisite, and our organization, the National Association of Sports Nutrition, has built this 27-lesson personal training course as a prerequisite so that you can become a licensed sports nutritionist. So you first do the personal training certification, then once you do that, you can go on and get your sports nutrition license. Now, if you are a metabolic practitioner, if you do it through low carb and you do them all together, a lot of our students will do the sports nutrition first. They just won't get their certificate until they complete the personal training. So you can do them out of order. But the standard progression as it was written was personal training first and then sports nutrition. So you don't need to be a doctor to be a primary sports nutritionist. Now remember, a primary sports nutritionist, their scope of expertise centers around not therapeutic means, right? You cannot treat disease as a primary sports nutritionist without a medical degree, right? Our expertise is in manipulating body composition, enhancing athletic performance, improving recovery from exercise. Those are our expertise. So you can write a menu for anybody, write a specific menu and tell them and guide them through supplement intake and food intake and nutrient timing for those three purposes. Now, that doesn't mean you can't take on a diabetic client. It doesn't mean that you can't write a preventative menu. This menu is going to help you through your sports training or your weight training, and it's going to help with insulin sensitivity and help prevent further progression of your type 2 diabetes. But once you start saying this is going to improve it, heal it, treat it, that's outside of our scope. That's when you need a medical supervisor to ordain what you're doing. Next.
What about high school runners? Most coaches are saying no.
Most coaches are scared or fat phobic, right? And most coaches are worried about high school athletes being compliant. So the worst thing to do is to break that seesaw, right? So if you're a high school person, you're trying to try a ketogenic diet and you say, I'm going to have my bacon, but now I want my pancakes with my bacon, and I'm going to have syrup, and I'm going to have 3 eggs with a yolk. Now you're breaking the seesaw and you're actually eating more unhealthy than if you just were low fat, high carbohydrate. I think for runners, for high school runners, if they are diligent and they understand the seesaw, they understand that if they're going to go high fat, they have to reduce their carbohydrate. I think it's going to be ergogenic for them. I think it's going to give them an advantage. Because younger people like my son right here are more prone to be metabolically flexible with minimal fat adaptation. I think my son was already metabolically flexible even before we put him into ketosis, and did his fat adaptation phase was 1 month. I think it was the month of January. So you'll see quicker results with younger students, younger people.
have about 60 to 70 net carbs, and ketones are typically around 0.5. If I exercise before eating, ketones go over 2. Is this valuable, or do I need to, or do I need to be in ketosis more of the time?
Okay, so there's a health benefit for maintaining a higher level of ketones. The sweet spot, I'd say, for athletes is around 1.0 and higher. Between 1 and say 3. 4 is a little high for me. Well, even though it's not even close to ketoacidosis, I'd say the sweet spot's 1. So I would, Paul, I would cycle your carbohydrates so that you stay in ketosis, but that you produce more and less for the health benefit. If you're wanting to burn more fat, staying higher level ketosis is going to benefit that. If you're happy with your fat and you're just trying to build muscle, then going down to just below 1 is okay, but 0.5 is still this trace that you're kind of knocking yourself out of ketosis there. And if you're not metabolically flexible, then it's going to take you days to get back into it.
Any magnesium, any potassium, any calcium?
Any magnesium? Yes, you need all those. I mean, those are essential minerals that our bodies need. Magnesium and potassium, sodium are 3 main electrolytes. So you need them, and you're on a ketogenic diet, you tend to lose them more than on a water-based diet. It's on a food diet that's primarily oil, you're going to lose your water-soluble vitamins and minerals faster than on a water-based diet, which is carbohydrate. So do you need to supplement with them? If you sweat excessively, and if you have symptoms of mineral depletion, such as cramps, or you're prone to heat illness, or you're constantly dehydrated because you just don't like the taste of water, then magnesium, potassium, and calcium are beneficial supplements. I don't substitute. I'm sorry. I don't personally supplement with calcium. I think I get that enough through dairy. I do supplement with electrolyte replenishment drinks that have potassium and magnesium. We're getting close to Dr. Brian's talk on the main stage, so we're going to have to wrap this up. Our time lasts until about 1:45 each day, and I'm just looking down here. He's actually starting his talk right at this moment, and I don't want you to miss much of it. So let's speed through maybe a minute or more. How many people are still here? We
44.
still have 44 of you in my room. That's wonderful. Brian's gonna be mad. Let's kind of wrap this up. Does one need to be in ketosis to see performance benefits? Not necessarily, but it definitely is beneficial to become fat adapted. And you first have to get into ketosis. Now, the definition of ketosis is producing ketones, right? So that doesn't, a ketogenic diet isn't, the clinical definition of a ketogenic program is a certain amount of carbs. But what really is a ketogenic diet is, are you on the regime that you're eating, are you producing an adequate amount of ketones to open up metabolic pathways? All right, that's that question. Carolina, I follow a low carb diet on weekends. I'd like to do I like to do trail for maybe 4 to 5 hours. I do fasting during that training, but should I eat something? No, I don't think you should eat something for 4 to 5 hours. Unless you're losing muscle and losing weight and you're trying to offset that, then you don't need to eat something during an intra-workout. Your food should be adequately supported by pre and post meals. Pre and post workout meals that are far away from them if you're trying to burn fat, and closer together if you're trying to recover and improve muscle mass. Ada Ramos, I'm just going to wrap this up really quick. I'm going to speed through them. No, do you have to be a CPP for your organization? No, NASN certification is great. So you can go right into primary sports nutrition licensing. with your NASN that meets the prerequisites. It is true that in the state of Florida, only dietitians can write diet plans, right? But in the state of Florida, you would be called a sports nutrition specialist with your certification if you're in Florida. And as long as your nutrition advice accompanies another program, such as an exercise program, then you can give specific nutritional advice. Writing diet plans is kind of an ambiguous term. Just can't call yourself a nutritionist or a dietitian in Florida, and it has to be part of a bigger program, because there's Weight Watchers there, there's all kinds of other programs that have registered dietitians overseeing them.